Up next, we have an amazing presentation with an amazing artist. You guys are going to want to stay tuned for this. I saw some of his work and I had it on loop for days at CTNX in the fall. I just was mesmerized by what was going on here, and he's going to be breaking down some of his math magic inside Cinema 4D. Gavin Shapiro, check him out.
Hello everyone, and welcome to my girlfriend's closet where I live and work. My name's Gavin Shapiro, and I'm a motion design director at RGA in New York. And today I'm here to show you a little bit behind my thought process in making my own work, and how I'm able to make very complex scenes by first starting with a simple base and making sure that's perfect first and then going from there. I want to thank Maxon for giving me the opportunity to speak here at Siggraph and show my work to you all, my process. And yeah, how about we take a look at my reel?
You call me up, tired of all your promises. This isn't love. You can give me what I want, round and round. I can't get you off my mind. Oh, 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 oh. There's no way I'll ever get to you. I'll ever get to you. There's no way I'll ever get to you. I'll ever get to you. 'Cause I need somebody. I know you do. I know you do. I need somebody. I know you do. I know you do. Baby.
Okay, so I got into Cinema 4D about 10 or 11 years ago when I first started as a motion designer. I started at The Onion. I started there as an intern doing motion graphics design for them, for the Onion News Network, for their web videos, and eventually for their TV shows on IFC and Comedy Central. I was one of the designers building their show packages, and for that we did it all in C4D. From there, I sort of went into more and more freelance work, a lot of it with C4D. And I also lived abroad for a few years. I lived in Osaka, Japan. I was there for 2 years freelancing from home. And I was also working at a company that makes pachinko games, which is like their equivalent of casino games in Japan. I also worked in Paris for a few months. I worked on a TV show there that's sort of like Jersey Shore. It's not a great show, but a lot of people watch it, and it had a really cool intro, and it was really fun to be a part of that. When I came back from living abroad for a while, I freelanced for a bit. I worked at a bunch of studios, and I eventually took a full-time position as a motion design director at RGA, and that's where I am now. So at a certain point, I realized that I'd kind of been a generalist for like 10 years, and I didn't really have my own personal style at all. So I wanted to try to develop my own style, and that's kind of a confronting question when you don't have a style. And I'm sure a lot of you face this too, where you're kind of like, what do I make? How do I make something interesting? Like, it's easy to just get in the trap of like following a bunch of tutorials and like trying all these new techniques. But then by the end, you're like, why isn't this as good as the work that I really love? So I sort of broke it down, and I was like, what's important to me? What's genuine to me? How can I represent myself and my work? And I just went back to things that I liked and things that I thought were interesting. So I first started with like Japanese architecture and kind of Japanese themes, because I've always loved Japan. I lived there for a while. It was really fun and really had an effect on me. So I put that into my work, and then I also put in penguins, just because ever since I was a kid, I've always loved penguins for whatever reason. And my first work was just trying to combine those two elements in interesting ways, just utilizing what I'd learned in my career and what kind of techniques and artistry I'd acquired over the years. So I started there. I started by making things that were not animated at all, actually, because I realized my strengths were in the fact that I was an animator. And I realized that I usually was just animating other people's stuff that they had created. So I said, okay, try making something without animation. Limit yourself in that way and see what you can put together. I've also always loved the absurd, and I've loved like the juxtaposition of something cute with something really, really intense. Some of my early personal work was that kind of thing. I made one with like a whale, like a really cute whale that like exploded out of the ocean, like decimated all these buildings. It's just metal music, and it was awesome. And that felt like it was true to me. So I wanted to carry that over in my work as I started animating this stuff. So that was kind of the beginning of it. It was taking these like really weird, surreal kind of scenes that had elements of Japanese architecture and stuff, and then just adding like dancing penguins, like make it crazy. And that's where it began. The flamingo stuff started when I was using, I started to use some music by an artist I really like called Young Bae in my penguin animations. And I just emailed him and I was like, hey man, do you want to use these at your shows? And he was like, hey man, can you like do it with flamingos? So I made a bunch of flamingo stuff and I sent it to him. He's been using it at the shows. And since then I've kind of branched out from the flamingo surreal stuff to like make it a bit more like mathematically focused, because I've always liked math too. Like I've never been a mathematician, but like I did really well at math in high school. I always thought it was interesting. So that's another part of myself that I've been putting into my style, and then everything's just sort of stacked from there. And now it's just, each time I make a piece, I try to find out, I try to realize what I didn't like about it and what I liked about it, and keep that in mind as I make stuff going forward. So that's how I've sort of developed my style to where I am, from coming from a position where I had no personal style at all, and I was kind of completely lost in terms of finding my voice in the 3D art world. So I would love to use this talk to answer some questions and show breakdowns for things that people have been asking me about in the comments on my work. So I'm going to show you guys how I animated the flamingos. I'm going to do a breakdown for the triangle piece I did, and also the Fibonacci piece. And lastly, I'm going to do a breakdown of the spiral with the triangles where they're all flipping and stuff. I'll show you guys how I put that together. All right, so the first thing I'm going to go over is how I animated this flamingo. A little side note here, I did not rig this flamingo myself. I bought this and it was already rigged, but if you want to rig your own characters, you can use something called the character tool in C4D. They actually even have birds. I'm not really adept in this tool, but if you go on Cineversity, you can check out the tutorials they have there, and you can get your very own rig all set up pretty easily. Okay, back to animating. A lot of people have been asking me about this. How do you animate the bird? So it's actually pretty simple. All I did was I animated the body, and then everything else kind of falls into place thanks to Cinema 4D's IK tools. So the legs are set up with IK, and the neck is set up with a dynamic IK. So it just moves automatically, and the tail is the same thing, just dynamic IK. So all I had to do here was animate the body, and then the rest of it kind of just falls into place. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. All right, let's get into this scene here. Oh, God, Jesus. That was very spooky. Holy smokes. Okay, let me get this idiot's mouth closed. Okay, so here's our flamingo. This is how we start. So this is already sort of set up and rigged. Here's the body. So if I move the body around, nothing happens. So first thing we're going to do is set up IK, inverse kinematics on the legs. So what you do is you set, first you click the first joint, like the hip joint, and then you hold down shift and you click the ankle joint, and then all you got to do is create an IK chain. And what this does, it basically makes all of these things as part of a chain. So this last one will stay in the same place even if you move the top one. So like if we move the body now, this leg will stay into place. So not quite perfect yet, but this is our first step. So let's do that for the next one too. You click the top joint, the hip joint here, and then you hold down shift, click on the ankle, do the same thing, create an IK chain. So again, move the body. It's moving both the legs now. So we're making progress. Next thing I want to do, one thing you'll notice is if you move it too far away, the feet will, they lift off the ground, and I want to make this a little bit more cartoony, so I want it to stretch. So all you have to do is in your IK settings here, you just turn on the squash and stretch. Put the stretch all the way up. So what this does is now when we move this away, if it goes too far, instead of lifting the feet off the ground, it's going to stretch them. Great. Next thing we want to do is, you'll see that when we move this around, the feet kind of go crazy here, you know, like I want them to be flat on the ground. So what we need to do is take your foot, your ankle, that was the last one we selected here. You add a constrained tag, and we're going to constrain this to this goal. So when you make an IK chain, what it does is it puts a goal null. Wherever you put that goal is where the foot's going to go. So we want to constrain the angle of this bone to the angle of this goal. So all we have to do, you go to your constraint tag, turn on PSR, it stands for position, scale, rotation. Just need position rotation. You drag the goal into that. It'll break his ankle violently and horribly. So to fix that, go to the offset, just rotate that 90 degrees. Okay, great. So let's just make sure this is working. Here's our body. And now when we move this around, so you can see that that foot that we've done this to, it stays lined up properly. So let's do that again for the other one. So go to your ankle, go to, where is it? Add a constraint tag to that ankle, PSR, position, rotation, perfect. We're going to put the right ankle goal, break his ankle, and then put this to 90. Okay, so now this should be ready to go. Okay, so now we can just animate the body, and like this is mostly there, you know? So I'm not gonna go through all the steps of animating this body. I've already put my animation here. So let me just swap that out. I'm gonna link this body thing, instead of linking it to the old body, the still body, I'm gonna link it to the animated body. So now it's gonna follow along with my animation, and this is mostly done now. So all this is animating one object. We're just animating this one, you know, null, and all the leg animation and everything follows. So the last thing that we have to do here is get this neck working. You know, we want that neck to look nice and floppy. So let's go to the, let's see. So basically what we have to do, we need to set up an IK chain along the neck, and then what we're going to do is turn on dynamics on that IK chain. So let's start with do an IK chain just like we did. Click on the base one here, the base bone, and then hold down shift, go all the way to the last bone here. I guess we could go to head, rotate. Yeah, let's include all these. Go to character, create IK chain. And now if we play this, it's going to act like a regular IK. So it's sort of interpolating how all these bones are going to move based on the position of this head rotate goal. So 2 things to do to make this work with dynamics. One is delete the goal. And then the other thing that we're going to do is go to the neck and you turn on dynamics. And now, as you'll see, it's perfect. It's flawless, a beautiful flamingo animation. Let's start this over. Go to your gravity, get rid of the gravity. And now we can see it's just kind of flopping around. So we're pretty close here. We just need to tweak these settings a little bit. So all of these control different kind of things. You know, this is sort of up to you depending on how you like it. But let's see if we can get a similar result. Yeah, something sort of like this. That's pretty good. Okay. So now we've got the flamingo's neck going, and this is looking pretty good. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to put the dynamic IK on the tail as well. So same process. Let's go to where's the last joint we want to rotate here? Probably this one. So let's click first on the tail rotate, hold down shift, get the last bone. So now we have all these bones, and just the same thing. So create an IK chain, and then we don't need that goal, and then just turn on the dynamics. And let's get rid of the gravity. And now we should be pretty good to go. Yeah, even that's pretty much okay. You know, you can tweak these however you want. I kind of like it a little floppier. Let's see. Something like this. Yeah, you know, there. So then this is just up to you. Whatever you so please. And yeah, that's how I animated the flamingo. There you go. All right, so next I'm going to walk through my thought process and the methods I used for building this piece, and how I came up with the idea, how I approached it, and how I ended up putting it together. So we're zooming into this triangle here. And as we go in, you see there's another triangle here, which is now just the place where we zoomed in the first place. So this whole thing loops, it loops seamlessly. I actually kind of cheated the lighting on this one. I couldn't really get it to loop perfectly because the lighting changed. So I just made it so the lights flash every half second. So now in the end on the loop point, when the lighting changes, you don't even notice. So yeah, I'm a charlatan and I lied to you all. So here's how we do this. Let's get into it. So the inspiration for this piece was this one, which I made before. And the way that this piece works, it's a similar kind of thing. We've got this square, and as we go into it, there's another square down here, and then we go into that, and then we go into the next one, and this goes forever. So this was something that I created before, and I want to take it a step further. Just to go over how this works exactly, you have your scene with a hole in the middle of it here, and then the scene is placed inside that hole, and then to make it loop, you're animating the little scene so it scales up to be the size of the big scene, and then you can just cut it on the loop point and it ends up looping perfectly. So I basically wanted to try that, but with a triangle. So this is called a Sierpinski triangle. It's a kind of fractal where basically what happens is you start with a triangle, and then every time there's a triangle, you put a hole in the triangle. That's an upside down triangle, and that makes 3 more triangles. And then with each of those, you do the same thing. So now there's triangle hole in this, and then it goes further and further. And basically by the end, you're going to get a shape that's like this. So I wanted to make something based on that idea. All right, so here is one of the very, very early versions of this project when I was trying to figure out just how to get the animation done. So what I always do for complicated loops like this is I first build out just the most basic form possible just to get the animation locked in. Once the animation is locked in, then you can go back and you start adding things, and it just makes it a lot easier to work with instead of having to tweak the animation and stuff while you've already put a lot of detail into it. Another thing worth pointing out here is that to easily line up the first and the last frame, I'm not animating the camera, but I'm actually animating this whole structure here. So I'm keeping in mind the difference between the first level and the second level of this structure, and I'm animating the difference between the two. In other words, the amount that this thing is rotating is the difference in rotation between the first level and the second level, and the amount that it's scaling is the difference between the scale from the first level and the second level. So this is the base. So what's going on here is, got a triangle. Okay, got a triangle. Here's the Sierpinski triangle, the first level of it. First thing I want to do is just get, how do you get it so the first and the last frame, you get this triangle here in the same position. So what I figured is you have the scene, and this is an instance of the actual base here. I've just made an instance of it just so it's easy to work with. So this makes it so that if I ever want to change it, I just change stuff in this base null, and it'll automatically update through all these things. So I can keep everything in one place to make it simple to work with. So first you have this base. Here's the anchor point here, okay? And then relative to that is another copy of this instance. So my idea was, okay, it's gotta go up into this triangle. We're gonna rotate it here along this axis. We need to rotate it into place this way, and then we also need to rotate it, we need to rotate it around clockwise, counterclockwise, so that it lines up with this hole here. Because as you can see, this hole is a triangle that's facing down. This hole is a triangle facing up. So we need to line up that as well. And then the third thing we got to line up is the scale, because this is obviously getting bigger. This triangle is, this outer triangle is a bigger triangle than this one. So we need to animate it, the rotation this way, along the X rotation here. We need to animate this rotation, along, what is this here? The Z, you got to rotate that. And then we also need to scale it up. So the 3 things we got to animate to get this small one into the position that the big one is in. So the way I have it set up, let's look at our keyframes here. So we're just animating all of those properties. So one property that we're animating is this. We're animating this, this rotation here, this X rotation. Another thing we're animating is this Z rotation. As you will see, this Z rotation animates along this, because this is the thing that we're trying to get into the right position, this center triangle, okay? So that's how we're animating that. And then we're also animating the scale here. So this is going to scale up. So then by the end, when you add everything in together, you get this small triangle animating up so that it matches the scale of the big triangle, okay? And then, you know, you can smooth out the animation curves and then get that all to loop. So another thing to make it easy to work with a lot of instances here, you know, or to work with a lot of levels, is if you put an instance inside another instance, you know, you put it under it in the hierarchy, you can see that anything under a parent in C4D, it's the position coordinates are relative, the position, scale, rotation, that's all relative to the parent. So if you want to add more levels of this, you can basically just copy and paste it, and you just paste those same coordinates in. So as you can see, each of these is relative to its parent, the exact same amount. So that's how you can get all these different levels and make it pretty easy to work with. Because like if I wanted to just put more in here, I could just hold down Control, copy this, put this under here, and then I could take these coordinates here, copy them, and if I paste them here, then they're going to line up and be relative to that parent. So it's all going to work out perfectly. It just makes it really easy to work with. It's sort of a little trick that I do to build some of these more complicated things with a lot of levels. So anyway, that's the first basic step. This is the hardest part, honestly, is getting this first animation set up. Just the face, that's all I need to tell me that it's working out right. Okay, so the next thing that I did is that I wanted to fill this out so that instead of just being a flat face, you know, we can see this whole room. I wanted to build it into a room. So that involves, you know, closing this off. So I wanted to put a face here and a face here. So in that base where all the instances are pulling from, I added these faces. And because it's already set up with instances, you know, everything just goes through it. This animation is still working out. This still lines up. And we can keep going and add some more detail in. So the next thing I did, what I wanted to do was fill in these gaps, because these are the holes that are missing here, okay? So if we take a look at this, you know, we're going into this middle hole, but these two are not filled in. This middle one is filled, these two are not filled. So that's what the next step is going to be. So it basically just comes down to adding more and more instances. So what I did is I made an instance, you know, this whole thing is built out of instances already. And you can make instances that include instances. So, you know, while we have an instance of this whole face thing here, hold on, let me just turn this off to make this a little more, a little easier to see. Okay, let's just focus on this for now. So basically, I made an instance of this whole thing, put it on these two little holes, which is here, okay? So now we have those in there. And then I just did that again. I put another copy of that instance in each of these little instances here. So each of these includes some more instances, okay, of that thing, you know, and this is just, it just takes time to line them up, but took a lot of revisiting trigonometry, and that's why I titled the piece Sohcahtoa, because if you guys took trig, you'll probably have horrible PTSD flashbacks to what those abbreviations mean. But yeah, so I just sort of did the math and figured out where these are supposed to go on these instances. And then for one more level, I didn't want to go too far and make it too crazy. So these I just capped with just a little normal, you know, tetrahedron here to fill that out. So now this is what the whole shape looks like, okay? Aside from this hole, because this is the hole that's going to have more of those instances. So once these were fleshed out, and now that we have this whole piece as an individual piece, now we can put these back on, you know, our original instances, and you can see how this is built up now. It's basically just this whole thing is taken, made into an instance, and that's put on those instances that we initially started out with. You know, we started with just the face. It's the same instances, just now instead of being one face, it's this whole structure that we built. So, You can see from this point of view, this is sort of what it looks like. We go through the whole thing, and then by the time we get back, we're already lined up, because that was the part that we figured out in the beginning, you know, getting the camera and the animation perfect from the beginning. And then after that, branching out, adding more details, making it more complex. So now this base is, we can just work with this base, you know. We have everything here. I'll show you how it works. Basically, this whole thing is built out of 3 different faces. That's it. So here's the whole base. Like here's side A, side B, and side C. So you can sort of use this as a reference to see where these things are. And you can see how it works. If you change anything on one of these sides, it's gonna just propagate through your entire piece, because we set it up in the beginning with all the instances, and we set it up to be nice and easy and automatic. So one of the great things about using instances in Cinema 4D is that if you set these up with render instances, what it does is, instead of copying all the geometry, it just references all the geometry. So basically you only need to load one level of this. Like the computer just needs to load one level of this, and it'll automatically, you know, it just puts it through the whole thing without needing to put in more geometry, like actually putting in more. It's kind of hard to explain, but the gist of it is that it'll make your scene run really smoothly, even if you have tons of stuff going on. Like I've got literally hundreds of these flamingos in here, and I can, you know, drag through on the timeline. Looks totally fine in the viewport. So now it's easy to make changes, because all you need to do is hide the instances. It's all set up so you can just work on the original piece here, you know. So if I want to move stuff around, I can just do it here, you know, move a flamingo around or whatever. And then that all is what updates in the main scene here. So it's very easy to work with. It runs smoothly, which is really impressive. And yeah, if you set your stuff up from the beginning with this kind of organization, you can make some really complicated looking stuff pretty simply. All right, the next one I'm going to walk you guys through is this piece called Fibonacci. This is a collaboration I did with my friend Arben. I'm sure you've seen his work before. It's all over Instagram. Super cool work. The way we built this one is, let's see. So I started by making a golden spiral. This is a golden spiral. The way it works is that it uses the golden ratio to define the size of each of these squares in the sequence. So the golden ratio is 1.618, and the reason that's important is this square, the length of the side of this square is 1.618 times the length of the side of this square, and then this square is 1.618 times the size of this square, etc., etc., etc. So important number to keep in mind, 1.618. For our purposes, we're going to be making these smaller. Like when we duplicate each one, we're going to make a smaller square. The smaller square is 0.618 times the size. So that's what we're going to use to make this loop. This is what it's going to end up looking like. So as you can see in this, we can basically make 4 areas that are different areas. And if we scale this in the right way, if we animate the scale, then we can make a seamless loop, because it's just going to repeat over and over and over and over. So let's dive into it. Okay, first things first, we got to make this really easy to work with, set it up in a really clean way. So the way I did it is I made the 4 different areas, just all next to each other, just so we can see them, work with them easily. And then I made instances of these, and I put these in this spiral shape, okay? So basically what's going on is we have an instance of each area. So here's the first one. The next one, it's under the hierarchy, so we can get an idea of where it is relative to this one. So it's 0.618, the scale, rotates 90 degrees. It's moved this much. So this I just figured out by just doing the math of good old pencil and paper. And then you can see here, we have this hierarchy set up the same as last time. So each of these areas is relative to the one above it. It's got the exact same coordinates. So if we want to make this go even deeper, basically we just need to copy this set of coordinates here, since this is where it is relative to the parent, and then put that on this new thing we just duplicated. So now we have another level. So we can do this just infinitely. We can keep going on and on and on. The reason I want to do this first is I want to find out where the center of the spiral is, because I'm going to scale the camera from the center of the spiral. So then the only keyframe we need to deal with is the scale of the center of the spiral, which the camera will be underneath. Let me show you what I mean. So if we make a few more instances of this, let's put this here. We're getting smaller and smaller. As you can see, as we keep going in, this this point here, wherever this is, eventually it's just going to be the same. We can go again. We can make this crazy. Just make a million copies here. By the time we're getting down here to the end, it's the same point. Okay, so that's got to be the center of the spiral. So what I did, I just took out one of those instances, put it here, put a null that has the same position. So I'm going to use that as you can see, same position. I'm going to use that as the position from which to scale the camera. So let me show you what I mean. So in this, I've got this animation set up. The camera is in this center point, okay? And that null, which holds the camera, is scaling down. So since we are basically trying to get from, we're trying to get from this one to this one, okay? Scale-wise. So we need to multiply the scale by 0.618, 0.618, 0.618, 0.618. We multiply the scale 4 times, 0.618 to scale it down 4 times essentially. So that at the end of the animation, it's at 0.146. You can do the math, but take my word for it. That's what it is. So in general, what we're trying to do is get the camera to go from seeing this at this scale to seeing the next level at the scale that the next level should be. So that's why we multiply it by 0.618 4 times. You can see at the beginning and the end, that lines up perfectly. So the other thing I did in this, just to get the animation going here, is I animated all of these things coming up, so that as as the camera zooms in, we're revealing these new areas that are coming in. So all that is just each of these instances here is just animating the Y position, just falling up into place. So we're going, basically we're seeing 4 new areas, right? We're seeing 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And now we're back to where we were. So over 12 seconds, we have 4 things animating in. So each one is animating in every 3 seconds. So you can see that we've got this one animating in, it lands at 90 frames. This one animates in, lands at 180 frames. This one animates in, lands at 270. This one, it lands at 360, and then we're back to the beginning. So that's all it is. Just each one animates in every 3 seconds to get that nice, clean 12-second loop. So that's the next step, is getting this animation to look clean and perfect and loop seamlessly. So next step, after we get the animation squared away, the next thing that I wanted to do was build in the rail, the track for the marble, the spiral that gives it that golden spiral kind of look. So the first thing I did was I just put an arc on each of these 4 areas, okay, just to see what that looks like. And I used an arc that was the same size, and it looks like it doesn't really line up, and each one it's a little bit off. So then what I did, I just went through basically and adjusted each of these arcs so that in the final scene with all the instances, now we can see that these arcs are lining up. And this was just going through and adjusting it by hand, just eyeballing it, nothing crazy. These are all, you can change the properties here. So it was basically just going through and making sure that these all lined up in the spiral. Next thing I wanted to do is make this look like a track. So what I did is I added a second arc here. So this looks like train tracks kind of, and then just went through in each of these areas and adjusted this new track that I made in each one, so that when we look at it in the spiral, they still all line up. So here you can see the tracks are getting a little bit wider on each iteration. But over here, they're lining up, and that's because these are scaling down so that the track stays the same width the whole time. So again, just easy to set up, or easy to do because of this setup. You know, everything is here, and this is where you can change it, and then you can see what's going on in this area that we already built and set up with all these instances. The last step was just to do a sweep NURBS on these, so we get these train track kind of things. And again, just going through each one, eyeballing the scale of the, the circle that's getting swept along here, so that when we look at it in the final scene, it all lines up and it looks like it's the same size. So just going through, doing it by hand, making sure it all lines up nice and clean. By the way, if you want to make a track out of a spline and you are not using just an arc, you're using something kind of squiggly like this, you can just use the Create Outline tool to easily turn a spline into a set of rails. The next thing that I wanted to do was animate a ball along this track. So how do we do that? The main thing I wanted to do, or the idea that I had was, let's see, in basically going into each of these little areas over here and finding the midpoint, like finding a track that would be in the middle of, making a spline that would be in the middle of these two rails right here, so that we have something that we can align to spline. We need to take a ball, a marble, align it to a spline. So we need to get a spline that's basically the center point of these rails. So all I did was I just went to each one and just put a rail in the middle. Like for example, this one is a 94 centimeter radius. This one is 89, so that's a 5 centimeter radius difference. So just subtract half of that, 2.5 centimeters, to get 91.5. That's the middle of this one. So I just did that for all 4 of these. Just went through, did the math, put them all together right in the middle. And then if we look at our scene here, we can see that now we have this middle line. So we're going to use this middle line as the spline that we're going to align a ball to, and then make that ball go around this middle spline right here. So how do we do that? What we need to do is take these instances and turn it into actual geometry, and then take that spline from that geometry and weld it all together into one spline. So what I'm going to do first, these are set to render instance, so it goes quickly, but if we turn this into geometry, it's not going to actually create geometry. So I'm turning this back into an instance, select them all, right click, do current state to object, and then you get all of these pieces of geometry from those instances. So I'm just going to take out these middle arcs here, because that's the only thing I want. Let's put them here. Don't need any of that because we just have all the instances. So now we have these 4 middle arcs like this. We just hide these for now. So we have these 4 middle arcs. So all we got to do to turn this into a spline, select them all, go to connect objects and delete, get to your point mode, and then you just go through, click on these 2 points. We're going to weld this and then click it, and that's it. So just do that for all of these. Oh God. Oh, no, don't do that. Oh no. Okay, no, just select these 2. Same thing, weld, MQ, okay. Welded, boom. And one more right here. Select these 2, MQ, weld. And now you're done. So now we have this nice, neat spline that's made of the center of all these things. And we can use this to drive a ball now. So the last thing is just putting the ball on that spline. So as you can see, all these surfaces, all these instances, these are animating up, and the marble on the track here, it's separate. Okay, I didn't animate the ball rolling yet, but yeah. So this is separate from this whole instance structure here. Okay. So that's kind of all it is. It's just you do a line to spline with this marble. At the very end, to get that bounce animation, I just animated the whole spline. So the marble is a line to spline, and then at the very end, for a little bounce, just animated the whole spline, bounced it a little bit, and that's kind of it. To get it to duplicate, to loop and go over and over, it's basically just, it's offset 360 frames. So I duplicated it, So here's the original. It's at that center point. And the other one, same thing. The null is at that center point. The scale is, again, 0.146, which is 0.618, 4 times. So you have the big one here, and then you have the smaller one that comes in like that. So if we get out of here, you can kind of see how this goes. You have this big one, which is just to get these last keyframes in there for the loop. And then this other one comes around. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. So the way I got that to loop with the 2 marbles is you have 1 marble here. This is the spiral. Here's the marble aligned to spline. And then it's just duplicated, made smaller, offset 360 frames. And that way, when we play it, it all loops perfect. Beautiful. So this is how far I got, and then I sent this to Arben. So if we take a look at what Arben sent back to me, it's pretty cool. He added all these awesome details. He added the balls. He added some placeholders for a few flamingos. These little pistons are here, these pipes. Really, really cool stuff. So he sent me this. And then I added, a few more details. I added some animation. I added my dancing flamingos and just some little animations here and there, like these things rotating, some pipes and stuff going up and down, some of these things going up and down and spinning and all that. So I sent this back to him. And from this point on, the rest is all Arben. He did all the texturing and everything. So, this is what I got back from him first. He did this, which was really cool. It was so awesome to see it in 3D for the first time. And then he just kept experimenting with it. Here's another thing that he made, which is really cool. He was playing with this for a while. Here's an animation that he sent, which I think looks pretty awesome as well. But in the end, this is what he ended up developing. Few things changed about this, like the ball was glass initially, and there are some other details that he added in later. But yeah, in the end, this is the final thing that he put together, and I think it turned out awesome. All right, so this is the last scene I want to go over with you guys. I'm going to show you how I put this together. And the general idea with how this one was built is I wanted to try and not only looping something in space and duplicating it throughout space, but also messing with the idea of offsetting time. So each of these things is duplicated, scaled up, rotated, translated, but it's also offset by 4 seconds. So in each of these, you see the same animation happening, but even though each one is offset by 4 seconds, 120 frames, the things line up between them. Kind of hard to explain without just showing you how it works. So let's just dive into it. So this is based on the golden triangle. Very similar to the Fibonacci spiral. Once you do enough Fibonacci spirals, you start getting into harder stuff like the golden triangle. So the way the golden triangle works, it's like similar concept to the golden ratio, but it works with like that 1.618 thing is the ratio of these sides. So that is how the golden triangle works, and you can replicate it through a spiral, just like the last piece that we looked at. So let's dive into this. Let's see how I put this together. Okay, so again, starting super simple. First thing I did, just build the triangle. Get that squared away, or triangled away. So sorry. We have your triangle here, and then basically just figuring out how to replicate this with a bunch of instances. So similar thing. After we have this shape, okay, so I took out this chunk here, and that's what we're going to duplicate this triangle into over and over and over, and it really just works like the other one. So in the sense that each of these, it's offset by the exact same amount as the one above it. So that's how I put this together. Just do the math and then replicate it through the whole thing. And then it's just a matter of getting this to loop. So similar thing, we have, in this one, instead of having the camera scaling in a null, what I did was I had the whole scene scale in a null. And I found out that ends up working out a little bit better, because in the camera one, when you're changing the scale of the camera, doing things like depth of field becomes kind of difficult, because you have to, the distance, your focal distance is changing because your camera scale is changing. So I found it was easier to leave the camera where it is and then find the center point, put all your scenes in that center point, scale this up. So we're doing a similar kind of thing. We're animating this scale going up here. And again, this is just working out the math. So, here's the beginning triangle is this one. Ending triangle is this one right next to it here. So basically we're scaling this up 1, 2, 3 times. So 1.618 times 3 gets you this number. Or I'm sorry, 1.618 times 1.618 times 1.618. 1.618 cubed. Jesus Christ, I'm not a mathematician. That gets you to this number. So that's the amount that you are scaling this up. And then I kind of just eyeballed it to rotate, and it turned out that it was actually 36 degrees to get to that. So that's the first step, is just getting this base animation locked in, getting this so it loops, getting it so it looks perfect and smooth. And now we're going to move on to the next step, which is getting this stuff to have that the triangle flipping animation to reveal the next one after that. So one of the limitations of instances, instances are really great. They're really efficient. They can do a lot. But one thing they can't do is offset time. You can't offset the time of an instance. So the way you do that is with XREFs. So what I ended up doing was sort of rebuilding this whole thing. But I did it with XREFs instead of with instances. So it's basically one animation of a triangle flipping, and then, those are all, they're in the same exact position as all these instances were. I just built it with XREFs and then offset the time. So to give you an idea of what this means, if you look at the XREF itself, frame 0, nothing there. Frame 1, it pops in, okay? I'll explain why in a second. So this flips over, reveals 2 triangles, all right? And then at frame 120, that's the last frame, and then it pops off. And that's because when we put the next instance, or the next XREF rather, in the smaller scale, okay, we want it to be the triangle. So this triangle is being placed here, and it's appearing at frame 1, right? But when we offset it 120 frames, it's appearing at frame, it's appearing at the frame that this triangle disappears, okay? So when you take this structure, this triangle with this animation, and you put it into the XREF system here that we built with those instances from before, you get this kind of animation. Again, so what's happening is on frame 0, everything's here, right? So frame 120, we get to frame 120, okay? That's actually this instance, or this XREF rather, of this triangle. Frame 121, it disappears, and now the next one is here, okay? Because this one is 120 frames off. So this one is starting at frame 1, where, it's starting at frame 1 where it actually appears, So that's how that is set up. So this is the first step, okay? The first step into getting this to be able to get to the point where we can add a lot of detail is just working out this base. So now that we have this base, we can go through and we can add all the detail on top of this that gets us to that really complicated looking scene from before. So what I'm going to do is show you the steps that I took to build this and to think about how to approach this, because this is a really complicated scene. So first what I did, you saw this, get the base going, okay? The next thing I wanted to do is figure out how to connect these in some way, and also connect them in time. So what I wanted to do was basically I put in some indicators that would help me understand how I can build this out. So I put frame counters on each scene so we can see what frame number each individual scene is at. And then I put all these letter markers so I can get an idea of where things are positionally. So I can have an idea of where to build things and where to attach things. I knew I wanted to get rails going in here somewhere. So now I have all the indicators I need that I can start fleshing this out. Next thing I did was see if I could get the spiral working. So in each, in that one scene, I built a spiral. Just in this one part, I could tell where I needed to build it. I knew I needed to build it around the F area. So I built this one arc around there and then just lined it up. I just kind of eyeballed it and went back and forth with the XREFs until this looked right. And then I started animating it. So basically what's going on in this is just, in this one scene, it's just a green platform going on a rail. And when it gets to the end, it actually just goes back to the beginning of the rail. Okay? So at the end of 120 frames, going back to the rail, at the end of 240 frames, going back on the rail. So you can see like every 120 frames, it completes the rail. The next step is I want to connect all these things. So, whereas before we had these numbers, or these letters rather, I wanted to figure out how to connect these and make rails that connected with each other. So I use those to help me indicate where I would build rails that would ultimately connect. So using that, I built these basic rails here. And then I tried getting, I just tried getting this to all line up. I made it flip a little too fast. I changed that later. But anyway, the point of this iteration was just to get these rails connected and working. So in this next step, my focus was figuring out how to get these little platforms to go down all these rails and get back to the beginning here. So this, as you will see, is why I named the piece Time Travelers. I think the easiest way to explain this is just to show an isolated section of it here. So what's actually going on, when you see this platform get to the edge, okay, it gets to the edge of the rail, and then when it's going to leave this scene, okay, on the next frame, so on this frame, on this rail, the platform gets animated off, and on this frame, on this rail, the platform gets animated on. Okay, so I'm turning the visibility on here at this frame, at this point in the rail, and then it's going all the way down here, okay? And then this is the last frame that it's on this rail. And then on the next frame, okay, on this frame, I'm animating it off. I'm animating visibility, so it's hidden from this scene here. And then at this frame, I'm animating the visibility on at this rail. Okay, and then it continues and I animate it. And then as you'll see, when it gets to the end, okay, the next frame, the visibility gets animated off again at this frame. So all these are happening in the same animation. It's just at different frames, I'm animating the visibility of that platform on and off. So if you watch this just all the way through here, this is what the animation looks like for this platform. And then wait for it. At the very end, platform comes back on, and then it leaves, and then starts it all over again. So just what's going on. It leaves here, okay? And then we go back in time to this point here, gets there, and then when it's lined up with the other one, it comes on here. So when you play it through, it plays through like that, but then when you put it all together, you get this smooth animation. And then duplicate it all over the place, it ends up looking like this. Next step was to add in some flamingos to see if this was working. So here we go. This is what it looks like with some flamingos on it now. Animation tightened up a little bit. Next thing after this, adding a little bit more complexity. I added some little, what are these called? The things on a railroad struts or railroad ties or something. Adding these onto the tracks. Here we go, adding more and more detail, adding these pillars to it, little tweaks in animation and stuff, just adding detail little by little. This was the first pass of rendering it. I was going for a theme of like a roller disco with black lights and disco balls and stuff like that. I had this crazy like bowling alley black light floor. And then after trying it out, this was like a final render. I was just like, this is kind of chaotic. It kind of took away, I thought, from the strength of this piece, which is all these rails and the time lining up and everything like that. So it was just a bit too much to understand what was really going on. So I ended up changing this. Just started from just basics, just using wood as the background you're not really supposed to be focusing on, and then allowing the rails to sort of pop off of that with some neon lights. And here's an example. So here's basically what this final scene ended up looking like. So this is the scene. This is the one scene that's in this whole thing, and it's duplicated all over the place and then offset 120 frames each time it's duplicated. So you can get an idea of how this works if you look at this part a few times, just as an example. So like, how about when this flamingo comes in and stops? So it stops in there. So let's see, that comes in at 480, and then he stops at 540-ish. Okay, so basically anywhere here where it gets to 480 is when the flamingo is going to come in and stop. So here about to get to 480, comes in, and then he stops around 540. So that's going to happen for all of them. So like this one too, for example. So 480, this one comes in, and then it stops at around 540. And yeah, it just keeps going and going. So that's how I put this together. All right, so I hope that was helpful. I hope you guys learned something. I hope this breaks it down a little bit. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my presentation. It was really fun getting a chance to explain my process a little bit and showing that to you guys. Thanks again to Maxon as well for giving me the opportunity to do that. And if you want to see more, check out my YouTube, my Instagram, look up shapiro500. And you can also check out shapiro500.com, which is a VJ site I put together. So you can just open it up and just play all my visuals. It randomizes the order. You can change the BPM just right in your browser. So hopefully that could help out some people as well. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. Oh, man. Welcome back to the show. My mind is still processing because maths. Welcome, Gavin Shapiro, to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Big round of applause across the internets.
Thank you for having me.
Big round of applause. Yeah, man. Wow. That was, I remember going over that with you, and I was just like I was like, how can I give feedback on any of this stuff that you're actually doing? That was amazing. Great job and great presentation too. I don't know if you've been teaching long, but it seems like you're a math teacher at least.
Well, I'm not quite a teacher, not quite a mathematician, but I have fun with it at least.
Yeah. So the internet's been loving it. So a couple questions, and they're coming in now, finally. I asked for questions, but most people were just, their minds were blown. People were talking about the Matrix. Time travel is now possible. So, because math, it's all possible. All right, so let's dive into some of these, and then we can have fun. So let's see. Could you use the camera parented to the same point and use an instance and camera morphs to switch between instances in each of the sequences? So
that's a good question.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I've played with camera morph stuff before, and I've found that you don't always get the exact control that you need for this kind of stuff, because sometimes it's easier to animate it if you're animating, like if it rotates 90 degrees, you just animate the camera around 90 degrees, and it's easier to match when you can just punch in the numbers, I think. Another problem with doing camera morphs is that it then it locks your camera into that exact place. So the way I do stuff, I usually animate either like a null and put the camera in it, because then that way you can just move the camera around to whatever shot you want and the loop will still line up. Or I'll animate the structure itself. So then when the structure's spinning and that animation is all looping perfectly, there too you can just sort of put the camera anywhere you want. You can line it up afterwards, and it just
your camera's just locked. It's just the object rotation, and then
exactly. So that way
coordinates.
You have more control over the camera if you animate the structure instead of the camera. You can just move the camera anywhere you like, line it up.
That's right. It's like I think Tom Cruise said it best, just inverted. Right? Yeah. Just don't do it. Don't move the camera. Just move your entire scene. See how that works? Yep. So much easier. I use that in photography all the time. Don't move the camera. Just move the whole world.
There
Everything
you go.
else is easy. All right. Let's see here. What sort of prep work do you do on a project like this? You showed some of your process, but what type of prep work?
Usually the prep work is doing the math of like, how do I build this kind of structure? So like for the triangle one, I had to look up what that triangle was and what makes it that triangle. It's like a certain number of degrees on each side and lengths of the side. So then sort of sketching that out and being like, okay, how do I put other things in this? If I'm putting a triangle in a triangle, where do I have to put that point relative to the triangle? So I do sketch out some stuff on pen and paper first, just to get the basic idea down, so I have some kind of blueprint.
Is that just a standard protractor and compass, or like,
it's just a pen, and paper? That's it.
It's the pen and ideas.
Yeah.
A pen and geniusness.
Yeah.
Let's see here. How do you light up the Tetris loop? The Tetris. How do you?
Oh yeah, the triangle one. So with that one, I can show that one on the screen.
Yeah, you want to share that?
Easier
Go ahead. And if you got that pulled up, let's go ahead and switch you over.
I got it here.
Hitting buttons now.
Let me know when we're good.
Get in there. No, you got to hit the screen share button.
Oh, so that's me being stupid. Okay.
The one stupid thing you do all your life.
I'm not that smart, as you'll see. Okay.
That button.
How's this? You looking good?
There we go. Nice and
okay.
clear.
So in this, I have here's the whole scene, and then I have a light here. I have this main light, which is in the hole. So that's going to be blasting light out of this hole that everything's coming from. I have a rim light, so it's just a light that I put here, and that just casts light to give a little bit of rim lighting. And these two lights, they just stay right there. So those are there the whole time.
Oh, nice.
Moving. There we go. Yeah, these are there the whole time. They're not attached to the scene. They're just like in space, as you can see there. So those two lights, and then the other lights are these little neon tubes. And the way I have these going is there are different sets of them, and each one is on a light here, or on a texture here, an emissive texture, and then those textures are keyframed. So every half second they blink. So different sets of these blink every half second. And I actually did that kind of out of necessity, because when I first made this, the lighting didn't line up at the loop point, because there's one level of the scene that's bigger than everything else and is casting different shadows. So I made the lights blink every half second. So you don't actually notice when the lights don't line up at the loop point. So that's how I got away with that.
Very
that's
cool.
pretty much it for this.
This is moving the world again, right? This is you moving the world and just keeping everything.
So in this one, I'm moving the world in this one. So here's the whole thing. The camera is just there. Camera's just there, and then the whole scene moves around the camera.
Nice. This is what it looks like inside the Tesseract, folks, for all you Marvel nerds out there.
Inside of a Tesseract. Here we go.
That's it. This is entering the fourth dimension.
Yep.
All right. So, let's go back to camera and let's ask you some more questions. Someone was wondering, how long did this take?
For this one. No, let me think. This one was probably a few weeks, I think, of chipping away at it. I usually work on personal work in the morning before I go to work.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I'll usually, because my girlfriend's a nurse, she gets up earlier than I do and goes, and then I'll get up and I'll have a few hours, and I usually chip away at it in the morning. So a few hours in the morning, and doing that for about 2 weeks, maybe, to get this one. I think this one was a few weeks. The rendering on this one took really long time. This one was rendering at like 20 minutes a frame, so the whole render took about 120 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you use? And I guess you're doing it all in-house. You're not kicking it to a farm or anything.
Yeah. When I did this one, I just had one graphics card, so it took a while. And for interior stuff, there's a lot of rays bouncing and everything, so that kind of stuff could take long. It's like all lit by neon lights in a giant interior Tesseract, so kind of stuff takes.
All right. Someone had a question about 24 frames or 30 frames for these kind of loops. They were wondering, they're interested in if you tried a more cinematic look at 24 frames per second, or is there a reason why you choose the frame rate you do?
That's interesting. I actually haven't really tried 24. I've just been doing it in 30. I don't know if there's a reason really. It's just what I've kind of been working in. I do make all my animations. I make it so all the flamingos bounce twice a second. So every, let's see. What I usually do is I make the animation 12 seconds long, so that you can cut up different parts of it and loop different parts of it, and they'll always fit into 12 seconds. Like if you have a piece of it that loops over 3 seconds or 4 seconds or 6 seconds or 2 seconds, like all those different lengths of animation can loop in 12 seconds. So, So then the birds dancing, that's a 2-second animation where it's each, they bounce up and down 1, 2, or no, that's 1 second. So they bounce twice in a second. It's half a second for each bounce. So everything is always going to be at that pace, which is 120 beats a minute. So I fit everything into like 1 second or 2 second, 3 second chunks, so it all lines up into 12
and
seconds.
Everything's divisible by 12. So then
exactly. Yeah.
So do that if you want to do that, folks.
That's right. Got
Everything
another
by
tutorial
12.
that explains that a little more clearly.
Who said the metric system was number one? Divide everything by 12. Sorry, it's a U.S. conversion joke.
There
The rest
you
of the
go.
world you guys laugh at us, but then Gavin Shapiro made this. All right. What about using camera shader on a plane? I don't know.
Camera shader on a plane. I have not tried that yet.
Things to try.
Yeah, things to try.
Things to try, folks. Things to try. All right. He hasn't tried that, so I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Somebody
yet.
else try it. Someone else try it and get back to me.
Yeah.
We got a day on the break. Someone make something happen with the camera shader.
I'll look into it though. It's a cool idea.
All right. Let's see, Gavin. Have you tried to work on a double helix?
A double
that
helix.
Yeah,
No, I
do some
I
DNA
haven't
stuff.
tried that. Like a
Flamingo
DNA,
DNA.
helix. Yeah. No, that's a cool idea though. Think about that. Maybe there'll be a DNA loop in the future. Who knows?
Here we go. Penguin, flamingo. That's what we got to make that. All right. Any good books you would recommend on getting back into math? Someone wants to go back into math, folks.
Books on
Where do you-
math. I haven't really read any books on math, to be honest.
Okay.
Books on
You're just
math.
doing your own research.
Oh no, I read a cool book about math. It's kind of long-winded. I don't know if I should go into explaining it, but it's about Fermat's last theorem, and it's like this 300-year quest to like solve this theorem that no one could solve, and it's pretty amazing. It's called Fermat's Enigma. So if you like math, it's a cool book to read. It reads like a thriller, but it's all true and it's insane. So I recommend that book.
Fermat's Enigma.
Fermat's Enigma. Yeah, I think that's what
Yeah,
it's
you can chat me later. I'll toss it in.
yeah. So that's a cool book.
Or if
about
you want to
math.
jump in
But
later.
in terms of getting into math and like learning this stuff, I barely remembered my high school trig and geometry, so I had to look all this stuff up again. So just Wikipedia, it's got everything. Wikipedia has everything you need to know.
Right. Another question: has he ever backed himself into a corner and had a scene become too complex and confusing, where you just give up and panic?
Yeah, that last one with the triangles, I almost did that. I was like going insane. Oh my god, my girlfriend would come talk to me. I'd be like, "Not now, babe. I'm thinking of spirals and like." It's kind of dark. Yeah, no, when I made it and I first rendered it out with that like disco ball craziness, I didn't like how it looked, but I was like, I'm in too deep, like ship it, move on, do the next one. And then I was like, no, I can't though. I can't just like ruin it and not show what I was trying to show in the first place. So
that one
I
was
backed
close.
myself emotionally into a corner, that one, and psychologically, but I eventually got out.
You were on the cusp of insanity.
I was on the cusp of snapping, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Does he get his material pattern from his shirt or vice versa?
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, I should. This is a good shirt for material.
You're getting all types of great ideas. Like next time you're like, I'm stuck. I need something. Be like, I need to go on the
Maxon
3D
chat.
motion show and
Let's crowdsource some
help me.
ideas, you know?
Come on, ideas.
These
All right. Ever thought of doing this through code? That's an interesting thing. Do you do code? Are you
That's a very interesting
Python?
idea. I have done a little bit of code. Like way back in the day, I learned like HTML and CSS, and then I did in college. I took a few like Java classes, and then recently, a few years ago, I wanted to make a game, so I learned how to use Unity. I learned enough C# to put a game together, and I actually do take a lot of those principles into my work when I build it. So that's why like I put everything in one null and then I make instances out of that null, because it's kind of like having a variable that's referenceable, that you can reference from anywhere, you know? So anytime you have the opportunity to put something in one place and not like duplicate your work over and over, you can simplify it. And I definitely took that mindset from learning to code. So, but yeah,
So
in terms
you learned,
of
but you haven't applied it yet. You haven't done.
I haven't tried to code this kind of stuff. No, but I've taken the way of thinking from what I learned in coding and applied that to this.
Do it with Neutron next. Do it with nodes. You have to be back.
Yeah.
It's the future.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. What renderer? He wants to know the renderer.
What renderer
are you using?
Yeah. For these, I've been using Octane.
Uses the Octane.
Yep.
Get you on some redshifting. All right. How do you have time to learn Japanese French while being amazing at C4D? You know Japanese and French?
Yeah, man. Well, that came before C4D, like this C4D stuff. I really wanted to live abroad and work abroad, so I learned French and I worked abroad there. I learned Japanese and I worked abroad in Japan for a while, and they were awesome experiences. It was really amazing living and working there. But that was a few years ago. I came back in 2015, and since then I started focusing more on like C4D and personal work and artistry and taking that a bit more seriously.
Very cool. Someone was wondering why Octane and not Redshift.
That's a good question.
Did you start on Octane, or did you?
Yeah, I just started on Octane, and that's what I got used to. I've used Redshift on projects. It's awesome. I'm just not as quick in it. So when I'm doing my personal work, I use Octane. But I don't know if there's like a best renderer. Dave Koss has a great video on that.
What's the best renderer?
All the different renderers, and it's just you find what works for you. Try out different ones, and if something works, then keep going with that.
And go with Redshift because you like the show.
Redshift.
Come on.
Yeah. Yes, Redshift is the best. I'm sorry, I said
done and done.
Just get Redshift. Someone was C4D, of course.
Yeah, you get the combo pack.
Just get the combo. It's right there.
How'd you animate the flamingos? Did you rig those? Did you buy a rig? Did you work with someone on that?
Good question. So I bought a rig. I bought a rigged model of a flamingo, and then to animate it, I just did it like like how I described in the first part of the talk. I'm not like a character animator. I don't really know how to do that. So I just I set it up in the way that I do know, which is I just animated the body, and then I was like, do the rest automatically. Let's figure that out.
There's a joint chain here somewhere.
There's a joint chain, I'm so used to clients asking for changes and stuff that I try to make things that are easily changeable. So I figure like if I tried to animate it by hand and it was all crazy and I wanted to tweak it somehow, it'd be too hard. So I try to set up things that are easy to change after you've already put it all together.
There's definitely some really good comments in here. Someone said this presentation needs a safe word. I think that's hilarious. That was great. You guys are hilarious.
You guys are hilarious. Yeah.
And let's see. Very good question here. Why flamingos?
Good question. So yeah, I think I really started with the flamingos because I was doing some work for Young Bae, that artist, and his aesthetic is very like Miami 90s. Look, it's on VHS, like vaporwave, so he wanted some flamingo stuff. So I just started playing with that, and then I had so much fun with it. It just kind of became part of my own aesthetic. They're very silly and floppy looking, and that makes me smile. So I hope it makes you guys smile.
There's a lot of secondary animation. A lot of secondary animation.
Yeah, definitely.
What graphics card were you? Because you said it took you like 120 hours. What graphics card?
So that was a 1080 Ti.
Single 1080.
Yeah, single 1080 Ti, and now I also have a 2070 as well.
Okay, up in your game.
Yep.
More. Mm-hmm. Someone was wondering what other 3D tools do you use with in your workflow?
Good question. I mean, for 3D,
any plugins? Do you have any favorite plugins or?
It's funny. I never got used to using plugins that much because I always had this fear that I'd get really used to a plugin and then it'd be a crutch, and then I'd like go to a studio and they wouldn't have it, and I'd be like, I don't know how to do my job. And so I always I just tried to do it always without plugins. So I don't really have plugins that I use. I use like the trap code stuff in After Effects. But for 3D, no, it's about time I learned X particles. I haven't learned that yet. I'd really like to.
Well, we have to have you back on and show some of your trap code stuff and your Red Giant stuff. That's a whole nother presentation. Your trap code stuff. Yeah. Gonna have to come back. Yeah. You'd come back to the show if we invited you, right? You had a good time so far?
I have to think about it. It was like so.
Yeah. So much.
It's been amazing.
All right. Oh man, we love having you, and we can't wait to have you at a live show too. So once again, where can everybody find you on all of your things? So it's at shapiro500.
Shapiro500. Yeah, I'm on Instagram at shapiro500, and if you go to YouTube, you can look up Shapiro500, and I have my work is on there, and the tutorials are also on there.
Awesome.
And that's for all this stuff. And if you want to use my loops as like a visualizer for a party or an event or something, you can go to shapiro500.com, and then it just plays everything in a loop. It plays it in a random order. You can choose which one.
Guess what I'm going to have going on in the background here.
Yeah, man, just all day long. You can change the BPM, download all the loops, everything.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gavin, for joining us.
Thank you for
we're going to be, man, it was so great having you. And tune in, folks. We're going to be up with our next presenters. If you're interested in character animation, you're going to want to stay tuned for William and Jill Russell. So stay tuned for that right after this break.